Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Mehmood with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Muslims in most parts of the world are celebrating the festival of Eid al-Adha today. After offering prayers, the affluent worshippers will sacrifice animals in remembrance of Prophet Ibrahim and his family. In Pakistan and some other countries, Eid will be celebrated tomorrow. Several governments have imposed strict COVID-19 restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. Pakistan says it will observe the 5th of August as Kashmir Siege Day, the eve of India's illegal annexation of the occupied valley. Foreign Minister Mehmood Qureshi said Pakistanis and Kashmiris around the world will observe 1 minute of silence to register protest. The day will mark 1 year to the worst military siege and communications blackout by New Delhi in the occupied valley. Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has ordered the release of 500 Taliban prisoners under the Doha Accord. During his Eid al-Adha address in Kabul, Ghani said the 500 prisoners are not part of the list given to the Afghan government by the Taliban. Earlier, the Taliban said intra-Afghan talks cannot begin unless Kabul releases inmates as per the names given to the government. Hong Kong has postponed September's parliamentary elections for a year amid a rise in coronavirus infections. In a press conference, Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the decision was made to ensure fairness and public safety. Earlier, 22 lawmakers accused the government of using the outbreak as an excuse to delay the vote. Iran has recorded 197 more fatalities from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, bringing the nationwide death toll to over 16,700. While the United Kingdom has announced a delay to the further easing of coronavirus restrictions in England for at least 2 weeks amid a surge in infections. In Pakistan, 27 more people have lost their lives, taking the toll to nearly 6,000 with over 278,000 cases. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 674,000 lives with over 17.3 million infections. And the National Basketball Association has returned, and the Utah Jazz have defeated the New Orleans Pelicans by 106 points to 104 at the Biosecure Bubble in the Disney World. Jazz trailed for the most of the game before Rudy Gobert made 2 free throws with 6.9 seconds left to seal the win. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now for the news in detail. Muslims in most parts of the world are celebrating the festival of Eid al-Adha today. After offering prayers, the affluent worshippers will sacrifice animals in remembrance of Prophet Ibrahim and his family. Pakistan and some other countries will celebrate Eid tomorrow. More details in this report.
Muslims celebrate the festival of Eid al-Adha at the end of Hajj ritual every year on the 10th of the lunar month Zil-Hajj. They share the meat of sacrificed animals with poor and needy people. This year, the occasion has come under unusual circumstances as COVID-19 grips almost all parts of the world. Several governments have imposed strict restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. In Indonesia, hundreds of thousands of Muslims offered prayers while wearing face masks and observing social distancing.
This year's Eid al-Adha is very different from the previous years because we need to follow health protocols as we perform prayers, like maintaining social distancing. We cannot stand close to each other or greet people. Another measure which I think is good is that we have to bring our own praying gears. So this is definitely different, and there are lesser worshippers as well.
This year, Muslims in Turkey offered first Eid prayers at the historic Hagia Sophia Mosque. World leaders including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Saudi Arabia's King Salman, and and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau have wished Eid to Muslims all around the globe.
Pakistan says it will observe the 5th of August, eve of India's illegal annexation of the occupied valley, as Kashmir Siege Day. Foreign Minister Mehmood Qureshi said Pakistanis and Kashmiris around the world will observe 1 minute of silence to register the protest. He said India is doing all it can to change the region's demography through its controversial new domicile law. Qureshi said Kashmiris have outrightly rejected New Delhi's actions. The foreign minister said Pakistan will continue to support the just struggle of Kashmiris. Qureshi said Pakistan will also issue postal stamps regarding the Sopore incident to highlight how Indian forces killed a grandfather in the presence of a toddler. He said Prime Minister Imran Khan will also visit Azad Kashmir on 5th of August. The day will mark 1 year to the worst military siege and communications blackout by New Delhi in occupied Kashmir. Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has ordered the release of the 500 Taliban prisoners under the Doha Accord during his Eid al-Adha address in Kabul. Ghani said the 500 prisoners are not part of the list given to the Afghan government by the Taliban. The Afghan president said he cannot release those 400 prisoners because they are accused of serious crimes. Ghani said he will call a Loya Jirga, a grand assembly of Afghan elders, to decide on the release of those inmates. The Taliban say the intra-Afghan talks cannot begin unless Kabul releases inmates as per the given names. Earlier, the group said they have fulfilled their end of the Doha peace deal by releasing the required 1,000 Afghan government prisoners. Spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said 82 more inmates were released, with 1,005 freed in total. Meanwhile, Hong Kong has postponed September's parliamentary elections for a year amid a rise in coronavirus infections. In a press conference, Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the decision was made to ensure fairness and public safety. Lam said she would invoke emergency powers to postpone the elections. The territory has had more than 3,200 confirmed infections and 27 deaths from the virus. Earlier, 22 lawmakers accused the government of using the outbreak as an excuse to delay the vote. This comes a day after the government banned 12 pro-democracy candidates from running in the elections. Now, Iran has recorded 197 more fatalities from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, bringing the nationwide death toll to over 16,700. While the United Kingdom has announced a delay to the further easing of coronavirus restrictions in England for at least 2 weeks amid surge in infections. In the United States, the death toll has crossed 152,000 after it reported nearly 1,400 new fatalities. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 674,000 lives, with over 17.3 million infections. More about this in this report.
The world is crumbling under the coronavirus pandemic as countries struggle to open for business amid surging new cases. The virus epicenter in the US is shifting to the Midwestern states as Ohio reported a record number of cases and the state of Wisconsin mandated use of masks. The pandemic is also showing no signs of abating in Brazil and Mexico as they struggle to contain the outbreak. In Cuba, fears of a rebound have got the government worried after the country reported daily cases as high as 37.
Each small peak underscores a lack of discipline, a violation that prompts stricter measures to be adopted, and which will be adopted. Because in some cases, I'm not going to say it is the majority of the population, but in some cases the measures on restrictions are not being respected. There is no realization that this virus kills.
The recent surge in cases in Spain has stoked fears of a second wave of COVID-19 across Europe, stalling plans of lifting travel restrictions. Meanwhile, the UK has reimposed COVID-19 lockdowns in parts of northern England after an increasing rate of transmission in these areas.
We've decided that we need to take action across Greater Manchester, East Lancashire and parts of West Yorkshire. So from midnight tonight, we are banning households meeting up indoors.
In Asia, spread in mainland China continues to inch up with Beijing reporting 127 new cases, the country's highest in months. In South Korea, the number of cases are picking back up as 36 new cases were reported in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Australia is still fighting to deal with the surging number of coronavirus cases. The worst hit state of Victoria reported 627 infections and 8 deaths overnight.
The daily new coronavirus cases have declined in Pakistan to under 1,000 as the country flattens the COVID-19 curve. Health Ministry says 27 more people died in the past 24 hours, raising the total to 5,951. The ministry said out of the 278,000 cases detected so far, over 247,000 have recovered from the virus. It said there are now over 25,000 active cases in the country, while 1,146 patients are in critical condition. Sindh is the worst hit province with over 120,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 92,800 cases. In the northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the tally of patients is nearly 34,000, while there are over 11,700 cases in Balochistan. India has reported a record surge in daily infections, taking the total to 1.64 million. 55,078 new cases were reported, while the death toll rose by 779 to 35,747. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare said there are 545,000 active novel coronavirus cases. India has been trying to open up the economy, but the consistent surge in cases has made it difficult to revive the ailing Indian economy. Now, US lawmakers have rejected President Donald Trump's suggestion that November's presidential election should be delayed. Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Election Committee Chair, Democratic Representative Zoe Lofgren dismissed the idea. Lawmakers said even through wars and depressions, federally scheduled elections were held on time. Earlier, Trump called for the presidential election to be postponed until people can vote properly and safely. Trump expressed concerns that postal voting could lead to fraud and inaccurate results. The authority to change the election date rests with the Congress. Moving on, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says his government is ready to open a new round of Norway-mediated talks with the opposition. Maduro said Communication Minister George Rodriguez met a Norwegian delegation to reactivate the dialogue. Earlier in 2019, Norway mediated an inconclusive round of political dialogue between the government and the opposition. Maduro suspended the talks after opposition leader Juan Guaido supported Washington's move to freeze Caracas's assets in the U.S. On July 24th, Norway's diplomat Dag Halvor announced the resumption of Oslo's mediation efforts, but Venezuela's opposition says the dialogue process ended last year and only free and fair elections can solve the long-standing crisis. Meanwhile, Iran has ruled out the negotiations with the US over Tehran's ballistic missiles and nuclear programs. In a televised speech, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said US sanctions are an attempt to collapse Iran's economy. Khamenei called on Iranians to resist American bullying amid increasing curbs. He said Tehran will rely on national capabilities and cut dependence on oil exports to resist American pressure. This comes after the US expanded the scope of its sanctions on Iran's nuclear programs. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the programs pose a grave threat to international peace and security. Iraq's military says two Katyusha rockets have landed in the perimeter of Baghdad International Airport near the military base housing US coalition forces. The military said the missiles were launched from two different places near the Baghdad Airport Road and the Radwania area. The military said there are no reports of damage or casualties so far. No group has either claimed responsibility nor denied the attack. The raid comes 3 days after three Katyusha rockets hit Camp Taji military base, which also houses US-led coalition forces in northern Baghdad. The Iraqi military said a helicopter was damaged in the strikes. Still in Iraq, nearly 560 protesters and security forces have been killed since the anti-government unrest erupted last year. In a briefing, Prime Minister's advisor Hisham Dawood said the government will treat the killed people as martyrs. Dawood said the new government of Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khadimi pledged to investigate the deaths of hundreds of protesters. Started in October, protests continued for several months with thousands of Iraqis demanding jobs and the removal of the ruling elite. Earlier, the Premier instructed the security forces to refrain from the use of violence on demonstrators. Over to Syria, where 5 civilians have been killed while 12 others wounded in a bomb attack in northeastern part of the country. Security officials said an explosive-laden car detonated in a village near the Syrian border town of Ras al-Ain. Security forces said they suspect Syrian Kurdish fighters to be behind the attack. Last year in October, Ras al-Ain was taken by Turkish-backed forces as part of Ankara's Operation Peace Spring. Turkey views the YPG as a terrorist group. The European Union has approved its first ever sanctions against institutions and citizens of Russia, China and North Korea for their alleged cyber attacks. In a statement, Brussels said it has imposed a travel ban and frozen assets of 6 individuals and 3 entities. It said the move is aimed to prevent, deter and respond to the increasing malicious behavior. The sanctions target the Russia Military Intelligence Service, North Korean company Chosun Expo, and Chinese Haitai Technology Development. China's diplomatic mission to the EU says Beijing is a staunch defender of network security and is itself a victim of cyber crimes. North Korea has also denied any involvement in the cyber attacks. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has warned Russia of all the threats it poses to Washington's interests in Afghanistan and elsewhere. In a testimony to a Senate committee, Pompeo said he has spoken to his Russian counterpart and raised all issues with him. He said the U.S. will do everything to ensure Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline does not pose a threat to Europe. Pompeo said Washington fears that the pipeline extension can increase Moscow's political and economic grip on Europe. On China, Pompeo said the tide is turning in dealings with Beijing, citing international support for Washington's policies. Now, Moscow has demanded an explanation from Belarus after Minsk arrested a group of alleged Russian mercenaries. Belarus said the mercenaries were suspected of plotting acts of terrorism before the August 9th presidential election. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia contacted Minsk Foreign Ministry to get additional information on the issue. He said insinuations that Russian organizations are sending someone to destabilize the situation in Belarus is out of the question. Earlier, Belarus detained more than 30 suspected Russian private military contractors near Minsk. In Crimea, 9 people have been killed and 9 others injured in an accident near regional capital Simferopol. State media said the driver of the microbus fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into a large truck. It said 7 people died on the spot while another 2 succumbed to injuries at the hospital. The Interior Ministry says it has launched a criminal case over suspected violation of traffic regulations. According to the traffic police, nearly 17,000 people were killed as a result of road accidents in the country last year. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Italy's Senate has voted to strip far-right leader Matteo Salvii of his parliamentary immunity. The move has paved the way for him to be tried for allegedly illegally detaining migrants at sea. The vote passed by 149 to 141 with 1 abstention. This opens the way for a fresh and potentially career-derailing trial on charges that can see Salvini serve up to 15 years in jail. Salvini is accused of illegally keeping people on a boat off Sicily for delays on 2019. It is the second time Salvini has lost parliamentary immunity over a migration charge this year. Under Italian law, ministers have parliamentary immunity for actions taken while they were in office. 4 civilians have been killed and 3 others wounded in a suspected militant attack on the city of Maiduguri in northeastern Nigeria. Emergency services said 3 rocket-propelled explosives were fired from outside the city and landed on separate sites. The military blamed Boko Haram for the attack, saying they were responsible for disrupting peace ahead of the Eid festivities. Maiduguri is the capital of Borno State, the birthplace of the Boko Haram group in 2009. Boko Haram has repeatedly attacked the town, while large swathes of northeastern Nigeria becoming a no-go area because of the militants. More than 36,000 people have died in fighting since 2009, with more than 2 million unable to return to their homes. Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara has appointed Defence Minister Hamid Bakayoko as the new Prime Minister. The appointment comes after Bakayoko's predecessor, Amadou Gon Coulibaly, died suddenly this month. In a statement, the presidency said Bakayoko will retain his position as a defense minister in his new post. Coulibaly's death had left him ruling party scrambling to find a replacement 3 months ahead of the presidential election. The October 31st vote is seen as crucial for the stability of Ivory Coast. South Korea's first military communication satellite has successfully reached its final position in the geostationary orbit. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said the ANSS-2 reached its planned position in fixed orbit 10 days after its launch. The agency said the military will take over the system in October after the conclusion of tests on its functions and operability. It said the motive is to boost military's capability to cope with network-centric warfare. The agency said the final assessment will be held by the end of the year. With this successful launch, South Korea has become the 10th country in the world to own a communication satellite exclusively for military purposes. Moving on, Russia has launched 2 telecom satellites from its southern Kazakhstan site 6 months prior to their announced date. The state space agency Roscosmos said a Proton M carrier rocket carrying Express 80 and Express 103 telecom satellites were launched today. These satellites are designed to provide mobile communications, digital, television and radio broadcasting services and high-speed internet access. The space agency said Russia and the Commonwealth of Independent States will benefit from the satellite. It said the satellites will have an active service life of 15 years. NASA says the Perseverance, its most advanced Mars rover, is in protective safe mode after suffering a glitch. In a statement, NASA said the minor communications and temperature malfunctions will not harm the mission as a whole. It said the Mars 2020 entered safe mode because a part of the spacecraft was a little colder than expected while it was in Earth's shadow. The agency said all temperatures are now nominal and the spacecraft is now out of Earth's shadow. The statement said all the issues had been resolved and the mission was progressing as planned. European economies crashed due to a massive economic contraction caused by COVID-19. Data released today shows the fallout has been widespread due to the shutdown of non-essential activities during the March-May period. Spain's economy contracted by 18.5%, while Italy's by 12.4% during the second quarter of 2020. French economy shrank by 13.8%, while Germany's by 10% over the same period. But experts say they were expecting worse statistics in Italy and Spain, as the 2 countries were among the worst hit by the virus. The U.S. economy has contracted at a 33% annual rate between April and June amid lockdowns and spending cutbacks during the pandemic. Economists say they expected to see a sharpest economic drop in the second quarter, with recovery thereafter. A sharp reduction in consumer spending was the main driver steering the economy into its second quarter chasm. Before the pandemic, consumer spending drove 2/3 of the U.S. economic activity. A plunge in exports, business and residential investment, as well as government spending, also contributed to the debacle. The International Monetary Fund predicted that Global growth will fall by 4.9% this year. European stocks have recovered from their drop a day earlier. Investors ruled the crash of European economies in the second quarter of the year was not as disastrous as expected. London's FTSE has edged up almost 0.5%. Paris's CAC 40 and Frankfurt's DAX gained over 0.5% each. The pan-European stock 600 has so far risen close to 1%. Earlier, most Asian bourses declined following a record contraction in US GDP in the second quarter. Most mainland Chinese shares, Japan's Nikkei 225 and Hong Kong's Hang Seng were all in negative territory. But Seoul's Kospi made marginal gains. The National Basketball Association has returned and the Utah Jazz beat the New Orleans Pelicans by 106 points to 104 at the Biosecure Bubble in the Disney World. Jazz trailed for most of the game before Rudy made 2 free throws with 6.9 seconds left to seal the win. Jordan led Utah with 23 points as they outscored the Pelicans 27-17 in the fourth quarter. Brandon Ingram bagged 23 points for New Orleans but missed a three-pointer with only 1 second left on the clock. Earlier, all players, coaches and staff members kneeled during the national anthem as players donned shirts regarding Black Lives Matter. All NBA franchises will complete the campaign while staying at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex in Florida. Pakistan cricket team has a clean bill of health for the first time in over a month as fast bowler Harish Rauf has passed consecutive COVID-19 tests. Rauf, among a total of 10 players and support staff, had tested positive over a month ago. 5 of his 6 COVID-19 tests until July 20th returned positive, making him ineligible for travel. But Rauf is understood to have been an asymptomatic patient. In Rauf's absence, Pakistan called up experienced campaigner Mohammad Amir. He will fly out later this week as he remains a part of Pakistan's plans for the T20 International Series. Borussia Dortmund captain Marco Reus will be sidelined for an indefinite period after failing to recover from injury. Germany international Reus has missed most of the year already after suffering a groin problem in February. His eventual comeback has now been delayed even further due to another injury. Dortmund finished second behind Bayern Munich, who won a record 8 successive league titles. The new Bundesliga season starts on September 18th. The Ruhr Valley club last won the league in 2012 under then-coach Jürgen Klopp before the arrival of Reus. The 31-year-old has been plagued by several major injuries and missed Germany's winning 2014 World Cup run. And now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.